Hi, I'm Jack ReVelle, and this is Continuous Improvement Television, CITV, brought to you by National Technological University. Today, we're at Northeastern University with our guest, Mr. Bill Conway of Conway Quality. Before I introduce you to Bill, let me take just a couple of moments to give you some background on the series. We have been going on now for almost a year, and next month, on the second Monday in May, we've got Mr. Shin Taguchi, who will be talking about robust design and the quality loss function. And in June, we've got Dr. George Box of the University of Wisconsin, who will talk to us about classically designed experiments. But today, we have a treat. And by the way, this is a very special kind of treat because if your CEO, your president, your vice presidents or general managers aren't in the room with you, go run after them. Go get them right now, because this is something they need to hear, they need to see. We've got a gentleman here with us today who at one time was the CEO of a major corporation here in the United States, and he experienced something in the way of a rebirth, if you will, learning about waste, learning about continuous improvement, and total quality management from the master, Dr. W. Edwards Deming, that he's going to be sharing with us today. And if your boss, your president, your CEO, your VP, or vice president isn't there with you, and he finds out about this, you're going to be in trouble. I want you to go get them right now, because they need to see and hear what our guest, Bill Conway, has to say. Let me show you some of the things that Bill has produced in the written word that if you haven't already seen it, you ought to see. To begin with, we have here a book entitled The Quality Secret. It was published about 3 or 4 years ago by Bill. It's called The Right Way to Manage. And this is an introduction, a 3-credit-hour course, if you will, into how your organization should be run if you want to really be world-class competitive. Bill then followed this up last year with Winning the Waste on War, Changing the Way We Work. And this is the lab manual. This is the book that tells you how to do what the Quality Secret discussed. And finally, in an effort to make things as easy as possible for everyone, Conway Quality, Bill's organization, produced this book, Waste Chasers, a pocket companion to quality and productivity. And now, let me introduce you to the man behind these books, the man behind Conway Quality, the man who speaks today for the departed W. Edwards Deming. Bill Conway graduated from Harvard College. Bill Conway attended Harvard College, graduated from the, all of a sudden I just drew a blank. I think of the U.S. Naval Academy, and after spending his time on some destroyers with the Navy, worked a little bit with the a company called Eastman Kodak, and after serving some time during the Korean War back with the Navy, Bill then joined Nashua Corporation, and he rose from being an industrial engineer at Nashua Corporation to becoming the CEO, the chairman and CEO of Nashua Corporation, and it was there that he met with Dr. Deming, and was featured not too long thereafter on the NBC white paper, If Japan Can, Why Can't We? Then for 20 years, last 20 years or so, Bill has been a leading exponent of Dr. Deming's philosophy. And now with his own company, Conway Quality, he's here today to talk to us about the leading causes of waste and what each of us, and especially the leaders of your organization, can do. And so I'd like to say now hello to the man who is, in my mind, is now the next generation of quality leadership following the demise of Dr. Deming, Mr. Bill Conway. Bill, welcome to Continuous Improvement Television. It's a real pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you for the opportunity to be with you, Jack.
And Bill has agreed to spend a few minutes with us now. He has a presentation he's going to be making. I'll be asking questions. And by the way, you can ask questions. If you've not watched this show before, we have two numbers that I'd like to show you on the screen. That one is for a telephone call, and if you'd like to call 617-373-3291, or if you prefer to fax in your questions, we have a fax number for you, and that's 617-373-4907. And if you wonder what area code 617 is, we're right in the heart of Boston, near Copley Square, and this is Northeastern University, where we're doing our third downlink as a part of our NTU series on continuous improvement television. And now let me turn the podium, if I may, over to Bill, and Bill is going to begin his presentation. If you've got questions, call them in, fax them in, but get them in. You've got a brilliant man with a great deal of experience, and he's a very expensive man, but he can be reasonable. We've talked about that. And what I'd like you to do now is listen to what Bill has to say, and if you've got any questions on this or related topics, Bill has agreed to respond to those questions to the best of his ability, and I assure you that's a great deal of ability. And now, Bill, you're on.
Well, today what we'll be talking about is what every CEO needs to know about quality. And first, I think that what we have to have in mind is we call this thing the right way to manage. So what is it all about? What does it mean you say the right way to manage? See, it's the way we think, talk, work, and act. It's continuous improvement of all the work. The work is what we're going to improve. The work of the people, the work of the organization, and we're going to do it forever. Now that happens to be a long time. It starts off a day at a time, but it goes on forever. And notice this one here. It's important to get that in mind, see, that it isn't just improving the work of the machines or the work of people. It's also making sure that we work on the right things. Because at least 50% of continuous improvement is to work on the right things. Because if that one's wrong, everything's wrong.
And I assume, Bill, that you're going to tell us how to find out what the right things are, so we know where to apply those efforts. So
Yes, we're going to go through that.
Super.
Now, on this next one here, we look there and we'll see what is it really? How do you do this? What to do and how to do it. What we're constantly doing is trying to find the waste, get rid of it, and keep it gone. So you start off, and here in your organization, or without your organization, your suppliers or your customers, you're trying to see what areas look like they need improvement. So for that particular area, you gather data and information. And what we call that is current reality. Way things are now. We get the facts, the data, including that about all the work and work processes of the machines and people that describes the area of our interest. As we find that out, we see where all the waste is, the troubles, the problems, the errors, the complexities, all the opportunities for improvement. We then say, well, where would that be if everything's right? So let's assume here we're at X bar. Here's where we are, current reality, averaging around there. We say, well, where would it be? If everything were right, gee, if good was up, it'd be up. Good was down, it'd be down. We've now created the gap, the difference. Is that difference now that we have to close? That's the area opportunity for improvement. So now we find all the reasons why it is here instead of here where we want it. Having done that, we now see them in a Pareto chart, A, B, C, D. Now, here are the reasons for the difference. Now we've got to see, well, what can we do about A to get rid of it? B, C, and D. Now, in most cases, we still won't know enough. We'll have to dig down deeper into the work processes, A1, A2, A3, and probably down A1A, A1B, A1C, and further down, 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 as we go through the 5 whys. Why is it here? Why? And the same thing for B, C, D. Now, as we get rid of those, then what happens? We start to get rid of the reasons, and now we start to close the gap, and now we go from one gap to another. And what is the key here? The key is to constantly have in front of all our people, every level, every area of the organization, we have to have the constant gap, the difference. and what are they doing to close that gap? Because if we're going to do this, we need most of the people in the action. Certainly we need all those with power and influence and a lot of people to help them throughout our organization to be doing this a good portion of their time. Because remember, as we're making improvement, the only way we get improvement is through change. No change, no improvement. If we did what we did before, and we do it in the same way, we're going to get what we got before. Only through change do we get this improvement, Jack.
I've heard it said, if we always do what we always did, we'll always get what we always got.
Exactly right on.
Okay.
That's just the way it is.
So it's a comparison then, if you will, of the as-is versus the should-be, where the should-be is the imagineered level, and we're looking at the waste that makes the difference between the as-is and should-be, and it's that gap that we're trying to eliminate through the use of the Pareto analyses and the sub-level Pareto analyses and the corresponding cause and effect analyses to figure out what it is that's causing these various reasons for the difference. Is that right?
That's right. We've got to get right into the work processes.
Okay.
That's where it happens. Now, what this really is a revolution in work through quality. Now, that revolution is already over 50 years old. Started right here in the United States in 1942. Between 1942 and 1945, as we know here, during World War II, enormous improvements were made in all kinds of quality, reliability of products and services, time to do anything, costs, every kind of thing was done, all utilizing these principles. As a matter of fact, the people like Dr. Deming, Dr. Duran, Dr. Grant, and many others were part of all the instructing and teaching.
Right.
Hundreds of thousands of managers, millions of people worked effectively in a new way. The revolution in work. Now, it's happening in an evolutionary way, but it's a revolution.
And then in 1945, it all disappeared.
Practically all disappeared very, very quickly because new people came in out of the service, new ones, the young ones out of the business school. None of them knew anything about this history that had happened. And all of a sudden we had 10, 12 million people that had to take and be let go from the defense industries,
right,
spread all around the world, and now the whole thing was gone and just waiting and lying dormant there from 1945 to 1979.
What happened in 79?
79, well, I happen to be involved in that.
I seem to recall.
And so there's been a history there in 1979 where in the previous 10 years as president of a good-sized company there in Nashua, we'd been competing with people working this new way in Japan, and we had a couple of major suppliers in Japan, and we could say very clearly the difference in the way they worked and the way they did things. And so on March 9th, 1979, I'd asked Dr. Deming to visit me in Nashua, and he came, and we had quite a discussion as to what it was really all about.
And you were the first American president, a company of a major corporation, to recognize the value of Dr. Deming and bring him in and ask him to help you with your organization, aren't you?
Yes, well, it really, I'm sure Dr. Deming at that time, when he was a consultant to all various kinds of companies in the United States and elsewhere, but it was basically to help solve one particular problem or another, utilizing statistical methods. And what I was involved with was trying to change the way to run the business. In other words, it wasn't, come and just help for one specific big problem where we need some design of experiments or something. It was, how are we going to improve the operation? As I said to Dr. Deming there, after the first half hour, I listened to him talking primarily about statistics, somewhat about people and the customers, but mainly about statistics. I said, Dr. Deming, I want to make sure you know why I have you here. We got to get the costs down. We got to get the quality, reliability up. We got to grow the business. We got to take and make improvements. We got to take and do it. What you're talking about, is that going to help us to make these improvements?
And his reaction?
His reaction was, he said, very straightforward, Bill, what we've got to do is educate the people, start at the top, get some education in their head, Next, give them a little training with the tools to get started. We'll start on the easy ones, start on the small projects. We'll make some changes, improvements. He said then we'll gradually work our way up to cross-department projects. He said then at the end of the year, we'll do what you want to do. We'll start to get at those big ones to make the really big improvements to run the business. So I said, fine. So that's how we work together.
I like what you said in your first book, the Quality Secret book, about the difference between education and training, that education is knowing why and training is knowing how. I think that's a very as clear and concise a differentiation between education and training that I think I've ever heard.
So education, what I call it, that's where you're trying to get people's head right. If people don't get their head right, nothing much is going to happen. So you really got to get in, what is it, why should I do it? That's education. Get your head right. Most organizations don't even have their head right.
Yeah, they just pass by that and go right to the training.
And then we got a bunch of tools. And what are we going to do with a bunch of tools when we haven't got our head right? We don't understand that our organizations are filled with waste. That's the problem. There's probably 30-40% on average organization of revenue waste in the organization.
That high, 30-40%.
You got $1 billion in revenue. The chances are you got 300-400 million of waste sitting around there. And then we wonder why we can't compete once we have to work against some people that have been working a new way 10-15 years. They just take our heads off.
I bet you find that the people that you work with, some of the when you first talk to the various presidents and CEOs of companies, and you start using statistics like that, I bet that they really question not your sanity so much as your statistics, and say, numbers like that. You're saying that we're wasting 30-40%. Don't they question that?
They certainly do. I can remember just a couple of years ago with a top management of a large hospital group, and so we started out, did visitors in Nashua, and I'd been asked down there to meet with the top group of 30 or 40 people, and so after the first hour or so, I could see that they really didn't have yet in their mind that, that really this applied to them in healthcare, and that they had the waste, and something had to be done about it. So I interrupted what I was doing regularly, and I said, now here are those 4 forms of waste: material, capital, time, and all the lost revenue that we have, the lost opportunities. I said, just think now of material. I started going back for the hospitals. I said, what is the waste of material of all those pills and all the other medicines that we'd have? And how many go by the dates, and how many do we lose, and we become obsolete, and everything else like that. So after a while, one of the hospital managers said, 30-40%. I said, what about the sheets and the pillowcases? Do we lose any of those? Does anyone take them? What happens to all those? Well, they take them out and they have suitcases, and they disappear, and all kinds of things happen to them. What kind of waste we got? A lot more than 30-40%. Oh, well, tremendous.
People take their sheets out of the hospital?
What about all the things, the tubes to give the IVs and the equipment and all that, and it drops and it breaks and all these things that they use? And pretty soon they talked about all the materials. I said, I said, why don't we just use 0.3, 30%? 30% in a hospital, out of $1 billion in revenue, they might have as much in materials like 320 million. So I said, 30%, 0.3, gee, 96 million. I said, gee, what about the waste in time of people in the hospital? What kind of waste is that? So some of them start off, 25%. Other top people saying 50%. Finally said, why don't we just use 30%? We could keep the numbers low, 30.
Very conservative number.
And the cost of people is usually over 50% of revenue. So to say 540 million or something out of $1 billion, so 540 million times 0.3. What? 160 more million. Well, the waste in capital. Well, I said, why don't we just estimate it low, 10, 15, 20 million, small compared to these other big numbers? I said, what about our hospital? Is it full?
All those empty beds.
So it's not full? What about the hospital down the street? Why aren't the doctors sending everyone to our hospital? Why does the insurance company send them all to our hospital? Why doesn't everyone want to come? What are we doing So we'll have the best hospital. On and on it goes. So I finally said, well, let's add up all the waste. So it adds up to about $340 million out of the billion. Just looked at everyone. Said, do you think we ought to change the way we were? And see, now we were home. Now there was their numbers, not my numbers. They're the ones that estimated the numbers. All I did is really just sum them up for them, sitting right there. Why, they knew as soon as they looked seriously at it, they'd find a lot more than that. That is, were just on the surface they could see that kind of waste. So it's every place. So it's no dying fad.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
There's no dying fad. For most people, it's still in the emerging paradigm category that really anyone that understands that and understands how big that waste is, they know that this is the way to take and work to get on with it. See, as a next one, here's a little bit about surveys and people making surveys all the time, and you've seen them. They've been in the newspapers and magazines. And here last year, I think one of the big ones was Ernst and Whinney or Ernst and Young. I think had a big one they published, and these others, you know, McKinsey and 80 Little, what have you, have them up in Canada. They're all over the world. And surveys all about, you know, the percent of people working in quality and what they think and everything else. And what kind of results do you get? The average there, they say around 70% of organizations say, oh yes, we're working in quality.
And what does that mean?
That means something different to everybody.
You bet your life.
Something very different to everybody. And then you say to them after they say that, well, all right, now I'd like to see the tangible, measurable. What are the quantifiable things we've got? We measured before and after for business results. What are they? Do you have those? And then everything starts to fall apart. And yet a lot of them will say that they're happy, yes, it's going a lot. They're very little how getting really at the waste. Now what happens as a result of this is that then sooner or later the CEO or the top people or a new one comes in, and now you look around and they say they're supposedly working in quality, and yet here all these things have been going on, spending all this money over the years, and nothing much happening. Well, very seldom, do they kill it. Sometimes they kill it, but very seldom, because today's world, a CEO today doesn't want to say that they're not working in quality. Everyone's annual report has to have a few pages about quality. They have pictures of people that worked on a project or two. They'll say some nice things that they did. And so what happens is they do what I call make believe. Talk about it, use the words, customer satisfaction, have all their advertisements and everything else will all talk about quality, but really not really get in. They head very quickly back to their old system of the way to run.
That reminds me, years ago on radio, before television, they had a show on Saturday morning for kids called Let's Pretend. That's what you just said reminds me of that. Let's pretend. Let's pretend we're in quality. And we see what happens.
In so many organizations all over the world. See, not really working in continuous improvement. Very little measurement. And when they do measure, it's usually just measure a result.
A yield.
And not just something of a process measurement. What do we got for process measurements as well as result measurements? See, and very quickly you realize not working on the right things. And of course that one there, not growing and creating jobs. Look what we've heard the last 5 or 10 years. Downsize.
Especially in my industry, in aerospace, it's been terrible.
Just downsizing. Who's upsizing? You know, it's interesting. Well, any of the people that really been over the long run really successful in continuous improvement, almost all of them are growth companies. Look at all those leading Japanese exporting companies in the early years there in the 70s and the 80s. And of course, why is it growing? Because we all know that it makes it much easier to do it if you do it when you're on the growth curve. And yet we see a few companies here and there, a few organizations, large ones, small ones, middle-sized ones, Motorola, Federal Express, Southwest Airlines. You see people out there really making the changes doing it. So there are people doing it. It's just a question whether we can get more to do it. That's what we really have. And you look here at this next one there, you know, what do some of these companies have in common?
I'm dying to hear what you're going to say about this.
Well, the first thing we'd all agree on, they're all giants.
Right.
And they've all had a very, very successful run for many, many years, many of them for 50, 70 years. And so they've been giants, they've been very successful. Yet we all can see that on that list there, during the 80s, early 90s, every one of those organizations got into serious trouble. And if you think back to think of their advertisements, think of what their people were saying in their annual report. Every one of those organizations all this time was talking about that they were supposedly working in quality. Now, what's that tell us? We saw them all gradually awaken. Right? A lot of them, they had new CEOs there. Everyone on that list did. As a matter of fact, all during the same year. And a lot of others, we could add lots of middle-sized and other larger companies like that. And what would we find? Here they'd have twice as many people as they need, or very high numbers. Everything out of line. What really is? See, you say to yourself, how could that happen if we were really utilizing the quality principles of finding all the waste, getting rid of it, and keep it going all the time? And gradually you realize it couldn't have happened. So it means that a lot of the work, when they were doing it, really was not on the right thing.
No, I think of companies that you don't even have listed there because they don't exist anymore, like American Motors and Studebaker, and other companies that were once considered to be kingpins in their particular industry that don't even exist anymore because they didn't realize that they weren't working on the right things.
That's right. You see it all over. You could have the same list. I do a lot of work over in the UK. You do it up in Canada. You know, you could add on there Ontario Hydro and a few more like that up in Canada, and Air France we read about all the time, right? And of course Renault up until a very short time ago. They've been, so it's all over the world. There's nothing American about it. It's just every place. Yet you say, how about these? And I always get a kick out of some of the names on that list. I remember Southwest Airlines. Remember last May, they announced they were going to start and fly out of Baltimore. And in May 1, most of the other major airlines were going to compete with them already reduced their flights on May 1 so they wouldn't have to compete with someone like Southwest Airlines out there working in the new way. And Walmart's coming to town and everyone's running for cover. And
well, you saw Kmart just lost their leadership because of what Walmart was doing.
Exactly. And concentrating on the work. That big article right there in the Wall Street Journal.
That's right.
It was right on the work. That's right where they were, with the work and the waste. Right? And of course here you see here Naval Air Warfare Center, see a government installation. Matter of fact, every quarter they publish in their newsletter, they have the waste and the amount of waste that they've gotten rid of and all that. So it's not just something academic thing that's just an industry of commerce. Any organization, anyone can do it. Now, what's the difference? You see, it comes right down to the way they work and what they work on. Did we work on the right things, including the growth? The waste, change the work, the barriers, supplier partnerships, time to do anything, terrific service, all the time, see, utilizing that value-added work process.
Boy, this sure sounds like a whole curriculum in industrial engineering here.
Gee, I tell you, that's one of the first things that I learned. I remember that first day there sitting with Dr. Deming, and he's talking very heavily about statistics, and he talks somewhat there about people and about the external customers. And so very quickly we could see that really what he was talking about was using statistics to record the level and the variation in the work and the waste that came from the work. And the whole thing was based on the old industrial engineering principles of find and change the troubles in the work and make the improvement. And what the statistics do is they help us to do all that type of thing. As a matter of fact, as you work this way, see, very quickly people come to that conclusion. There's little other than real value-added work in anything, provided you eliminate the waste. And of course, key words there start with W, waste and work. And here we're talking about wasted materials, capital, time, and of course all the lost opportunities. And where does that waste come from? All that waste is coming there from the work. Then those words, real and value added. See, value-added work, that's the work the external customer would pay for
Right.
if they knew what we're doing. That external customer is a tough arbiter. If they don't want to pay for it, you better watch out, right? This world is full of people, see, not doing work that adds real value, and if it doesn't, sooner or later, all the chickens come home to roost. Now we're back to that waste.
Yep.
You remember there in that chart early on, the difference between the way things are now and the way things could be or should be if everything's right, if everything were perfect. And there's that gap we talked about. And that's the gap. You notice there's another thing to see in the level, the way current reality, the way things are now. So you notice that's fairly level. You notice here as we get over here now, the way things should be or could be, they not only have changed the level, but now we've changed the angle.
The slope of the line.
Now we got the continuous improvement. Right? Now,
You know, and I think a lot of people might say, well, that waste, it's easy to talk about, but, how do you measure it? What they don't realize is that we're already measuring it. It's called the cost of quality. And we already know what that is. We're just afraid to admit it.
I tell you, one of the things that, what does Conway Quality do for people, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we do is we help them create the gap in their mind, like that example I gave of that hospital
Right.
system, right? Create the gap in people's mind, that's getting people's head right, and then show them how to help to take and close the gap and to take and get rid of it. That's really what the system is. If we're doing that, we're going to be ready to compete in the world. If we're not doing that, we're not.
No, we better look for another job.
Well, there aren't going to be many left.
That's right.
Where we're not going to have to work this new way. And there are those four forms of the waste, the material, the capital, time. And now when someone says material, right away we got to understand that's all the forms of material waste. It isn't just a scrap, the seconds or something like that. I mean, this is all the things to do with the supplier partnership. We're working in the engineering design process, right? And all the other types of things that go to work to take and have the material waste before we ever get it. We paid too much for it. The design is too complex. It's too hard to make, and on and on. So it's every form.
I gathered from what you just said about supplier quality that one of the things that Conway Quality helps its clients do is to eliminate these various forms of waste, not only in the company itself, but in their suppliers' companies as well.
Absolutely right, Jack. As a matter of fact, we had probably one of our biggest successes over the years in working with Rover Car in the United Kingdom. And I remember in the very first days when we started working with them, going through the arithmetic with them, to have them see clearly that here in a business like this, some 40%, 40 cents out of every dollar of revenue, they were buying material from a supplier. I'd go over and say, now look, we can do everything in the world about that other 60%, including our profitability. But if we don't attack successfully that 40, we have to compete against the others who do. There's no way we can compete, because the 40 is just too big a number, and with 40% waste, that means that someone could take and get that down by 16% of our total revenue, 0.4 times 0.4. And with that kind of a number, if you're not working in supplier partnership, not working with the suppliers, most organizations just can't compete once they get up against anyone that works the new way.
That's one of the things I think that Dr. Deming called to our attention before anyone else, and that is the importance of supplier partnerships, the importance of minimizing the number of suppliers you got for any given commodity to reduce the variation. And I don't believe I ever read anybody talking about that before Dr. Deming did.
Right? He certainly was. He was way ahead of his time for most things. And of course, the waste of capital, and everyone starts right off with inventory. There's nothing wrong with inventory. We should get on that. But of course, in most people's receivables, the debtors, there's oftentimes just as big a waste. You look at the average Fortune 500 company, they'll right now, if we took out their annual reports, they will be having receivables there of 55, 60 days. And you ask them the terms of sale, 30 days with early discount and everything else. I mean, it's all over the place. The waste of all the capital equipment all the buildings.
Yep.
And of course, that's just another form of material with all the same kinds of waste in it that we
Exactly.
have in the regular material. Time to do anything. And of course, here we're talking not just short time, but the long time. The long time, 5 and 10 year product development cycles, all kinds of cycles. Happen to work with some of the people in the forest industry in the cycle, 35 years to grow the pine trees down south and all types of things. So cycle times on everything.
They can't improve the cycle time of growing a tree, can they?
Well,
Or can they?
there are, yes. As a matter of fact, as you talk with them nowadays, too, that of course there are these fast-growing trees, and you notice there's more and more articles in the world about the eucalyptus tree, among
Right.
others. And of course, what's that really? That's trying to get the cycle down for growing those trees down to 7, 8 years instead of being 30, 35 years and times like that.
And they're finding ways to do that, huh?
And more you see that what's happening in South America, and of course in Australia, and now here in the United States, there are various organizations starting to take and go to work with eucalyptus or other types of trees to speed
Fascinating.
up the growth.
Didn't know that. Instant tree.
So even then, well, I don't know about instant, but certainly more quickly than we've seen in the past. And of course, this last one here, the gross profit or the lost opportunities, all the things we should have done, we didn't do. That's almost always the biggest waste of all in practically every organization in the world. See, and this is where we're going to tie in the growth aspects and upsizing and what are we doing to take and help the people, all tied here to growing the business. And usually this is the biggest one of all that we have. Now what's missing as you look at that, say?
One of the things that's missing is we haven't had any phone calls or faxes come in yet, and I sure hope that our viewers are taking the time to articulate their questions and put them in a form that they'd like to call them in or to fax them in so that they have the opportunity to tap into your brain and your experience. Just thought I'd mention that. That was one of the other things that's missing.
Thank you, Jack. Well, the first one there you say that one thing I always believe in very highly is getting right at this thing of growth and lack of growth as part of waste, because as soon as you see, all our people understand very quickly that as soon as we say we're going to improve the quality and productivity of the work, that means it's going to take less people to do the same amount of work. And no one needs to be a genius then to figure out that if we don't grow, then it's going to take less people. And of course, if they don't see us concentrating on that, then right away they begin to wonder in their mind, should I cooperate? How
Exactly.
much effort should I put in? So clearly it's in our people's interest to do that. At the same time, what we want to do is lift the people up, make them all more capable, focus on the work and the waste, and of course that one there, the top management leadership. See, I was at a giant big installation here maybe about a little bit under a year ago, about 9, 10 months ago. And another one of the people working with me, Jody Gunnison, and I were there, and we were talking about the problems this organization was having, making improvements. And so after about half an hour, I said to the top people, I said, well, tell me, what are you doing different now than you were a year ago today, 3 years ago? What are you doing different for work? So the 6 of them went through what they were doing. No, still pretty much the same. Went right back to see what you said earlier. Keep doing what you did before. You'll keep getting what you got before.
Right.
And what is required for this thing here to work? Top management, senior managers, anyone with power or influence has got to be setting the example for the other people for working a new way. And what are they doing to do that?
Yeah, I see a lot of our senior executives across the country. They don't walk the talk. They say, we want you to work in teams, but they don't work in teams. We want you to practice continuous improvement, but they don't practice continuous improvement. And they wonder then why their people aren't doing what they talk about, because their people aren't stupid. They watch and accept the role model of their leadership. And no matter what the leadership says, they emulate what the leadership does.
Exactly. And this one here is another example of getting people working on the right things. That, see, a lot of people have the idea here, continuous improvement, means just incremental improvement over here on the right-hand side of the triangle. Now you can stand this triangle like this with the narrow part at the top, or you could turn it upside down if you want, but the same type of thing you see. You see incremental improvements over here, here are all these arrows, every level. Here are the people down here in the plant or in the office, and their supervisor, and they find some troubles and errors, they can make some improvement. Everyone can do it. On the incremental improvements, anyone can lead. So a lot of organizations get into continuous improvement, and this is what they concentrate on. They work on this. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. They certainly should take and be doing this, and this is where we got to start on the small and build up.
Right.
However, we all know that if we're not into the big changes, over here on the left, nowadays the word the people use to describe that is re-engineering. And I call that, all that is a marketing word, re-engineering. Anybody that's been seriously into improvement over the years knows they've always been re-engineering. All we're talking about here in re-engineering are the big ones, the major process changes. Over here on the right, we got the small, mid-sized process changes. Over here on the left, we got the big ones. We used to call them, when it originally started working this way, major management directive programs, major management innovations, just the big ones. Now, the difference is that over here, only top management can lead.
Right.
You see, if I'm just working here on the right, and I'm the big boss, I say, now, go ahead and you do it. And the people can do something. In a lot of organizations, they do some very good things without top management providing much leadership.
That's called empowerment.
Now you go over here, that's right. Now you go over here on the left, however, and you say to the people, go do this. And of course, very quickly the people see they can't do it.
They're cross-functional, requires too much resources, takes too long.
So if we don't get the top management,
It's not going to happen.
now you see why a lot of the companies got in so much trouble. Right? See, if they weren't operating here on the left-hand side, we're letting status quo go on 5, 10, 20 years, right? And then what happens? We all know what happens. Deep trouble ahead.
But re-engineering made Hammer and Champy a fortune.
Oh, did it ever? Did it ever? And see, every organization should be doing it. See, all the time. It ought to be a regular thing. See, it isn't just something we do now and then. It's a regular thing. And see, where does that come from? See, where that comes from is identifying and quantifying the waste. So why is that such a fundamental thing? See, that all starts, this thing creating that gap right there. And of course, the management leadership and the imperative, see, is the key thing to make it go.
I think one of the problems, Bill, is that many of our managers, our senior executives, don't recognize the four categories of waste that you're talking about. They think of waste and they think of scrap and rework. They don't think about the gap caused by a change in technology, or a gap caused by the poor way of handling your financial resources. And that's one of the things that I think Conway Quality does so well, is help organizations to recognize all kinds of waste and helps them to focus in on where their biggest problems are so that they can get a maximum return on their investment.
Exactly. What we're talking about is how to run a business. How do you run a business? How do you improve it? I mean, before Deming came to see me now, well, what kind of background we'd had, lucky enough, we've been into things that we're seeing how well these leading Japanese exporting companies were doing. Right? Knew something about that industrial engineering, very important. We had that as well as variation. And with business had been growing, compounding 15, 16% a year, for some 20 years.
That's nothing to be ashamed of.
So we were trying to take and make the business grow ahead. And Deming comes, and what did he say to us, starting right that first day? He used to say, Bill, he says, you're the problem. He said, you and the way the other top people, the way you run the business.
How'd that make you feel?
At first, it used to be very irritating.
I'll bet it did.
And I tell you, an important point for every senior executive is when you're willing to get up in front of your people and tell them that you're part of the problem. The day that I did that in front of about 50 of the senior people was like taking a yoke off my back, just like that. Right? Now, you're ready to take and get going. Use variation, treat the people with respect. Very quickly we got underway. First 6 months, 9 months, we had hundreds of projects underway. And we get going, and of course, then Deming's still with us there. Grazzi, we figured out what to do, how to run the business this way. We saw how to apply it to all different areas. We saw the training that people need. We saw human relations teams work together, treat people. The industrial engineering. Even today, most companies don't do much teaching of that industrial engineering. Everyone's very quickly to get on the statistics. Everyone's very quickly to get on the human relations and the teams. Very quickly to get on the customer. But they're very slow to get at the fundamental, and the fundamentals on the work.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies that I've been exposed to do not recognize the scope and capacity of their industrial engineers in the way of their backgrounds, and as a result, they really constrain them, they really limit them to some very narrow opportunities, and as a result, it's the company's loss.
Exactly. Exactly. And when I was starting to do the thing, of course, as you mentioned earlier, I was the only CEO in the Western world even trying, 1979 and 80. And I tell you, it's a lonely place.
I'll bet it was.
No one to call. No one to talk.
Until NBC called you.
NBC called, that's right, in March of 80. That's when they called for that one. Well, once we did it, once we figured out what the system really was, and we've been at it a couple of years, we then said to ourselves, all right, let's now try it out on running a whole business. This is when we're absolutely astounded. We started November 1980 in a couple of those businesses, one high-tech one and one low-tech in photo finishing. And this is what happened in one of those businesses there in a period of 8-9 months, and this productivity chart over a couple of years. And so, you know, inventory down 3 months to a month and falling, yields up, you know, from 65 to 95%, shipments on time, more than double the productivity of all the people. Meantime, of course, the business is growing because we got such low costs and high quality, the customers want to buy and all that type of thing. See, when we were doing that there in 80 and 81, very quickly we saw not only was this the way to run a business, you saw how it applied to everything. You saw the enormous change. See, not small change, enormous change.
Did your customers recognize this?
Very quickly.
What did they say? Did they start asking how you were doing it?
Very quickly, people wanted to know. There were people coming all the time to the company to try to find out. Our customers, our suppliers, competitors, everyone wanted to talk about what we were doing.
What's the secret? The quality secret?
The quality secret is to find the waste,
Yeah.
get rid of it, and keep it gone. And that means all the forms of waste, like you were talking about before. That's every area of the business. And some of the big ones, they're the lack of growth, the supplier partnerships that people forget about, the policies and procedures of how you're going to treat people, a lot of ones that people forget about. See, why and how we were able to obtain those results. Top senior management leadership, education, training, the way we ran things, the waste, the work, team together, aligned, supplier partnerships. And well, they're the interesting ones. See, we very quickly made it the only acceptable way to work. The only acceptable way. Now, we didn't do it by ordering it. We did it by our behavior, is to set the example.
What did you do with the folks that would not accept it, that would not leave the old ways?
Well, really, the only ones that we ever had to terminate, and there weren't many, it was less than 1%, were managers that just plain would try to undermine the system. And that was one thing we just let people know that we wouldn't accept. If someone was going to undermine the system, they had to work someplace else. Once it became clear that that's the way it was going to be, there weren't many people that wanted to undermine anymore.
At least not openly.
Not openly undermine. And the great majority of people, however, very quickly saw that this was a much more pleasant way to work. I mean, they just saw that it was in their interest to do it. And because you can't possibly keep this at work, because this thing here, once anyone gets into it, works any place, right?
It should.
So we then tried to apply it all over to the businesses, everything, right? Gaining alignment, we saw the importance of that. Learning how. You could see how far anyone that worked this way over 20 years was ahead of others in the particular businesses that had been doing it. So we saw the tremendous advantage, see? And all this time, right up to the present time, learn the urgent need to change. And certainly it's just as great now as it ever was. Huge opportunities still available sitting out there. We put together this model for success.
I was wondering if you had a model like that.
Yeah. Well, what is the model for success? Right? We learned how to help companies carry out the model and see the incredible results for anybody that carries it out.
Now, this means that this model would be applicable to every organization, whether profit or not-for-profit, products or services, big or small.
Big or small, high-tech or low-tech.
Okay.
Any kind of organization in the world. And you start out there by that red circle right there, the core activity. Core activity we call identify, quantify. You might say, well, why quantify?
Got to.
We want to see what's important.
We've got to have a baseline.
You got to know where you are. And then you want to get rid of it through continuous process improvement. People are, what's that? I say to them, get rid of it so it stays gone. You know, how often we go out and we fix it, and it comes back again. We fix it, and it comes back.
I once had a boss years ago at when I first joined Hughes Aircraft. Unfortunately, this gentleman has since retired, but brilliant insight. He said to me one day, he was a quality manager. He says, Jack, he says, I can solve any problem in this plant. I know because I've solved every one of them 5 times already. Because of exactly what you just said. We do a fix, a chewing gum and spit and rubber band fix, and for a few minutes it's fine, and we walk away, and it's right back, snaps right back to where it was.
Gone. Might take a week, a month, a year, but it's coming back.
That's right.
And so then we have the 4 main supporting elements. And here's the one, the external customer. And we all know how key that is. That's the one that uses our product or service, pays the bills. Deming used to say to us right from the start, no customers, no orders, no jobs. Now, it's also important, though, that anyone understand the external customer can't tell us everything. The external customer can't tell us that our costs are too high. They don't know our costs.
Mm-hmm.
The external customer can't tell us that our productivity is too low. So we have to have other sources of information that tell us these things. Over here we have, of course, the human relations activity. And what is that? There's 2 things. 1, lift all the people up, make everyone more capable. And secondly, making their interest to do this core activity. Then the 3rd one over here, variation. The difference between things, the technical tool we're going to utilize. Now I have nicknames for those 3. I call this one here external customer. I call that everyone loves the customer. Everyone over here, the human relations. Everyone loves each other. This one here I call charts for Bill. Now they're all very important. We've got to remember they're not the core activity. So you see a lot of companies got charts all over the place. Everyone loves everyone. Everyone loves the customer, yet they're going down the tubes. Why are they going down the tubes? Because they're not doing that core activity. And then we get that fundamental one there, the work. As we've talked about earlier, we've got to change the work. So we study all about the work and the work process, and we learn all about the waste. And as we do that, then we see the rest of the model. And as we go around the circle, we first see the external customer, goes to internal customers, internal suppliers, the customer-supplier relationship, the partnerships, the teamwork. And over here, the human relations quickly leads to the leadership, and communications. And over here, on the right, variation, with statistics and measurement, constant measurement of both the process and results. And down here we see the basic thing. Here's what we actually do, the red box, the main event. Study the work and work process. We learn all about the waste, current reality. Use the concept of value-added work. Then we do create the gap with the Imagineering. And of course, that Imagineering then is what releases the creativity and innovation. Because I asked Jack, you got any problems? Jack says, nothing, everything's perfect, Bill. How much creativity is he going to have?
That's right. And on that note, we're going to have to take a break. We're right up to our break now, and we're just about halfway through the visuals that our participants, our viewing audience have. And so we'll take a 10-minute break now. Go do whatever you do on your break. If your CEO, your president hasn't made it yet, get them over there. We still got another hour with Bill Conway. And when we come back, we've got some more insights for you talking about waste and the quality secret and the right way to work. See you in about 10 minutes. Hi, we're back with Continuous Improvement Television. I'm Jack ReVelle, and today my guest is Bill Conway of Conway Quality. We've been talking for the last hour or so about the right way to manage, the quality secret. Bill has a model that he's developed, evolved over the years, and he's been talking to us about it. And we're going to continue now talking about that model and move into a discussion of how this model is a part and parcel of the alignment of the organization, talking about the development of the mission, vision, strategic objectives, and your daily management of your operation. Bill, continue on if you would.
Well, just before the break, we've been talking about the full model where we had the core activity, and then we had the four main supporting elements, and then we built up each of those elements. And you could see there those heavy dotted lines. And what they ought to show is, see, it's all tied together. People can't just pick out one thing here or there and just do one thing and think everything's going to be all right. You'll make some improvements with any of them. They're all so powerful. But, of course, what we need is them all to work together. And then that leads to the last one up there on the upper left-hand corner there in the green, the alignment, common purpose, vision, mission, values, and beliefs. Now, what I call that, I give it a nickname. All those big words, I'm not good at big words, Jack, so I just...
You're too modest.
I call it Hong Kong.
Hong Kong.
Hong Kong.
Are you going to tell me why you call it Hong Kong?
I call it Hong Kong because I want to. And since I'm the one who names it, it's Hong Kong. It's just my nickname. Just like charts for Bill for variation, I had Hong Kong for alignment, common purpose, vision, mission, values, and beliefs. And so I often say to people, you know, where are you trying to go, Jack? Jack says, oh, I'm trying to go to Rio. Someone else says, I'm going to Moscow. I say, no, we're going to Hong Kong.
I'm with you.
Right? All going to Hong Kong. So see, can everyone in our organization relate what they're doing to where we're trying to go? See, until we can, how can we empower even? People ever use this word empower. See, I empower Jack, and here Jack's on the way to Rio. Right? Empower Bill, and he's on the way to Moscow. And we're all trying to go to Hong Kong. So we got to be very careful, see, on empowerment and everything else until we got alignment. And the more alignment we got, then we're in a position to take and really empower people. And of course, as we're going for that alignment, we want to see here that to get these results that we want, we really got to go down both sides. A lot of people just go at this thing, and they look down here and they say, well, what's the strategic initiatives? What are we really trying to do? And what are we trying to do? What are the vital few to do that? Well, we certainly need all those, and that leads then to specific actions, then down here to get results. But if we don't get over on the other side, you remember, you and I talked about this one before, that leads right to that behaviors. What is it we stand for? Here's where we're trying to go. We're trying to go here to Hong Kong. Now, what do we stand for? What kind of practice we got? Are people here, are they interested in finding the waste? What are the behaviors of the senior people? Because if the senior people don't change their behavior, we're coming down here for culture changes, that's got to equal behavior change. Because only when we get the behavior change are you and I and the rest of the organization going to believe this is for real, which then will get us in tune and get us aligned to take and go to Hong Kong to get the results.
Otherwise, so, you may be shanghaied.
You may be shanghaied. And of course, as we create that alignment, I mean, really, in most organizations, you talk to the people, see, and here we all are going to Rio and San Francisco and every place else.
And everybody doing a great job of it.
Working hard.
Yeah.
See, they're all working hard. They're all smart people. We hired the best people. But they're all going different locations. You see the difference as you come up that line, and finally you get those arrows lined up. Now, when you get underway, you talk to people from Toyota and you read about their articles they write in the Wall Street Journal every month or two, right? When you get close now, over the last few years, to a lot of the people at Hewlett-Packard, as we've seen them come on very strongly here, and what do you see more and more of the people? You see that alignment, common purpose. So they're all pretty crucial there to get that alignment. Without that, a lot of this stuff isn't going to work very well. Now we'll talk a little bit about some of the various tools, Jack, that people need to be aware of. And see, this leads right up to the CEO, what the CEO needs to understand. That if we think that we can have our people to work effectively, if we as the top managers, if we're not interested in external customers, and you've seen how many of those big companies we talked about lost interest in the customer. And why they lose interest in the customer is senior management lost interest in the customer. So are we seeing that it is no customers, no orders, no jobs? Are we seeing that that's guiding our work? Are we asking the right questions with the people all the time? And of course, do our people understand internally there that everyone has a customer, everyone has a supplier, and that we see that, as Deming used to describe it, that it's all a system, it's all one big system. The salesperson's out there, gets an order. If we got the order, we now enter the order and we start our cycle back here. We now enter the order and the paperwork comes in, and now we start to take an order the merchandise, order all the raw materials, order whatever else is required, lay the plan to take and make the material if we're making things, lay the plan to take and carry out the service activities of what it is, and then it goes through a whole series of steps, each step, and finally we've completed our product. It goes in the warehouse, goes in the truck or the rail car, and out there to the customer again, and the market research starts. Did we take and do what they wanted? What changes do we need to make? We get the new orders from the customer and go around. See, all of us act in our organization so that people see that the whole business is a system and the way that we're all going to work together. See, until we see how that all ties together and act accordingly, we're going to have serious trouble in the company.
So they need to see the interrelationships between all these processes and how all these processes really come together in a synergistic kind of way, if you will, to form the overall system.
Exactly. And you can see that a little bit more clearly here in this little diagram, that you see everyone here is where we are now when we're doing certain work. But for us to do our work, we've got to have suppliers that are giving us whatever it is, ideas, materials, supplies, whatever it is. And then our customer is telling us what they want for outputs, right? And here now in our own area, we're doing work here. Now we all can see, actually this one here, they have their customers out here, just as this supplier here is also a customer, and back here has someone else doing work for them and suppliers to them. And the whole chain, is a chain like this, is going through the organization from one end to another. And we need to understand how all these things, all these inputs work together, because if we don't understand that and don't act accordingly, we're never going to make it. And see constantly people, who are my customers? And everyone, when you ask them who their customers are that hasn't been through this, always gets surprises. Who are our customers? Who are our suppliers? We have them, not only the direct customer, where we're providing the product or service, but of course if we're now on the board of directors and we're the stockholders and we're CEO of the business, who are some of their best customers, some of the biggest and most important customers? Right there are the stockholders. And what about the public, the environment, and all that? And we've seen company after company, but they didn't recognize that. You've seen top management after top management not recognizing the stockholders were some of their most important customers, right? And pretty soon the stockholders threw the bums out.
That's true.
Right? So it's a very important concept for everyone to have at every level.
You know, several years ago, I was asked by a brand new advanced integrated manufacturing center at a university in the Southwest. I won't mention which university it was. Asked me to come in and facilitate a quality function deployment session that led to the development of a mission statement for this advanced integrated manufacturing center. And we spent, for those people who know about quality function deployment, about half a day just talking about who is the university's customer. And everybody at the beginning thought I was making a joke when I said, who's your customer? And it ended up taking four full hours to discuss the fact that, yes, the students, but how about the Board of Trustees? How about the regents? How about the faculty? How about the administration? How about the staff? How about the parents? How about society in general? How about the companies, the organizations that are hiring the students? We ended up with a list of close to a dozen different customers for a university, and some of the faculty and administrators were absolutely stunned when they started thinking about the difference between their traditional approach to customer and what we were talking about there that day. So I can just imagine what it would be like in dealing with a major profit-making organization as you just described.
It's all the time, and people need to have some kind of a model whereby they can do work and make measurements. Otherwise, they can't make improvement. And so here's a simple one that many of us have used for many years now. Originally was in Quality Progress magazine, I believe, from originally from one of the top people at IBM, I believe, put it in way back in the early 80s. And here's the value-added work activity, and here's our customer, internal or external. We ask what their requirements are. All right? And that's our job now, to provide them that output. In order to do that, of course, we've then got to, in our organization, we go back here and put requirements on our supplier, and we have these inputs here. And of course, we are getting the inputs from people, material, machines, methods, information, environment, all coming in to our work activity. But now, in order to make improvement, what we've now got to have is the feedback mechanism. What are we going to measure here to see that really we are providing this customer what they want? What are we going to measure here with our supplier to make sure our supplier is giving us what we want and need? And it's those measurements that are now going to allow all the parties to work together towards improvement and thereby keep that up all the time. So we have to have a system whereby we're going to do that. And that, of course, leads to that one I alluded to before there, the example. Our supplier is the problem. And of course, people will usually tell you, oh, terrible problem with my suppliers to get things on time and the right quality and the right quantity and what have you. Well, just remember this little example here for the typical organization that you have. If we got revenue of 100, the average will be around most organizations about a 30% gross margin. So we got cost of goods sold at 70, gross margin at 30, and the general service administration, right? And what will that usually be? Somewhere around 20. Sales, administration, and all the general overhead and what have you, leaving a pre-tax profit about 10. Now, what is the material purchased? Material purchased, on average, is going to be 60% of that cost of goods sold, or 42. Now, for any particular industry, it can vary widely. But, I mean, that's the kind of number we're working with. So if we leave out the supplier, we're leaving out improvement of 42 cents of every dollar. So any organization that thinks it's in it very heavily has to have that supplier partnership and a vigorous attack on what they're doing. And of course, remember, when you got problems with the supplier, the problems usually don't start there. They usually start with yourself. You know, what kind of problems we got? Specs aren't right. Drawings aren't right. People changing the schedule all the time. Orders late. Emergencies all the time. We don't communicate back and forth. We're not on the same team. We haven't been through that customer supplier. No teams, no working together. And then we wonder why we got troubles coming out of the suppliers. You've seen that all your life.
I know you're absolutely right. And what amazes me is that we continuously have the same problems over and over and over. You know, the new management comes in, old management leaves. The problems are still the same, and you come back 5 or 10 years from now, the faces in the org box, in the organization boxes, are different, the names are different, but the problems are the same. And nobody seems to do what needs to be done to right the situation.
See, it's the way that we work. What we work on, the way we work. It's the work that has to be changed. See, if someone doesn't change the work, then nothing happened. Either the work of the machines, the people changes, or nothing happens. We're just going to keep getting the same thing, just as you said, over and over again. Now, this next one here is to show clearly, see what we're trying to do when we say lift up the people. See what happens to people as they work the new way. Here we all here in the organization here under this histogram, distribution of values here in the orange. And we're varying, we're all different. Some understand it's a system, some think it's the individual. Some come in late, some come in early.
Some are tall, some are short, yeah.
We're all
And
different.
here we are.
Yeah, but we're all in the system for our organization, averaging here about good. It's center line number one. Now, what is the job of the manager at every level? The supervisor, the CEO, everyone, every level. What's our job for all our people is to lift the people up. Remember now, the basic things that we're doing to make the new system work is we're making all the people more capable than they ever dreamed they could possibly be, both individually and collectively. And as we do that, we're also making it in their interest to work the new way. Now, if we don't do that, nothing serious is going to happen. Now, it isn't just the center line number 2, then the center line number 3, number 4, number 5. Constant improvement, always getting the people more and more capable. And thereby, you see why when Motorola says, and others say, well, now we're going to provide education and training for at least 5% of the time to people to lift them up. What are they trying to do? That's what they're trying to do.
You know, and I think a lot of companies that are trying to adopt the Six Sigma program that Motorola has innovated and TI has picked up on, forget that it's a Six Sigma improvement not only of their products and their processes, but in the Six Sigma improvement in the right way to manage. That in order to bring our people from where they are to where they need to be, that our management, our leadership, if you will, needs to change if we're going to experience that Six Sigma improvement that we're targeting for.
Absolutely right. And if we don't lift the people up, then the people aren't going to be capable of doing it.
You can give them the best equipment, you can give them the best supplies, the best raw material, the best working environment, all the right benefits, but if you don't lift them up, all that is for naught.
Exactly right. Exactly. Now, here what I sort of call the 5 process checks for the treatment of people. And try to reduce it all down. There's been so much written about everything to do with people and all the human relations. But we all need a simple list that gets at most of these things. And so here are our 5. First one is one we're all familiar with, the golden rule: treat people the way we'd want to be treated if we're in their position. We all know, anytime people violate the golden rule, trouble ahead. Don't know when it's going to come, you know it's coming. Next one there, 90% of the time it's the process or system, not the individual. Now, most of us violate that on a regular basis. And we do it all at our own peril. Now, a lot of people right away get afraid of this. They say, oh, everyone's going to just have the excuse. 90% of the time it's the process or system. People will say, well, it's the system, not me. Well, there is, of course, some reason to have concern about that, but there's a basic thing in here that they forget. It's a very important part. That's this. Let's say that you and I are now going through some plan or operation, and you introduced me to this fellow Charlie as we're going through, and I say, Charlie, what are you doing? Charlie says, Billy said, I'm a maintenance person. He said, I'm out here to fix this air conditioner. I say, Charlie, what % of the time are you deciding what to do or how to do it as a maintenance person? Charlie would think about that, and he'd probably say something like 85, 90%. He says, Billy said, I get out here, I have to analyze the problem, find out what really caused it, what kind of spare parts do I need? Do I need an engineer to help me to fix it? What tools do I need? What order do I use? What meters do I require? Oh, he said, I'm deciding what to do or how to do it. Think of the salesperson out there selling. Think of that sales administrator on the telephone. Think of the accountant trying to collect their receivables, every one of them. See, as soon as we understand that, we soon see in our organization hardly anyone who works there, at least 25% of the time, isn't deciding what to do or how to do it. And really what that means is the average is well over half. Now what that is telling us, say, that all the people in the organization, for when they're deciding what to do or how to do it, are part of top management. They're deciding those things. So if I'm deciding that, then for that part of it, I have the obligation to change or improve. So it isn't just someone can blame the system for anything that they have control of. For anything they don't have control of, they then have the obligation to collect the hard data and present it to the manager above them. So there's no way that people can walk away from this. People are afraid of this without understanding it. Right? Make it in people's interest to share.
Yeah, without data, you cannot make an informed decision.
Absolutely. And just think now how many people violate that. And look how often we violate it. If I give all the tickets to the game to Jack, does Jack want to help Mary and Alice and Tom? Now, if they don't, how are we going to take and raise the average? What are we going to do to make it in Jack's interest to share? A simple thing we can do. Nobody gets promoted if they don't give hard evidence in their present job of willingness to share. Right away, you'll find most people are going to share. Eliminate the caps on the quality and productivity of the work. You just think of all the things that people use. It isn't just MBOs we use for caps. People use the budget for a cap. I beat the budget. Who says the budget's good? We all know how the budget's made. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. Just think now, if we're walking through anyone's work, and I see Alice, and I say, Alice, gee, what are you doing? She tells me, Alice, how long does it take to do that? So about 3 hours. Oh, Alice, how long have you been working here? 6 years. Alice, how long did it take there 2 years ago to do that? So about 3 hours. How long did it take 5 years ago, Alice? About 3 hours. What have we got? We've got right there a cap on the quality and productivity of the work out there in our audience right now. In most of your businesses, your organization, public or private, wherever it might be, you have them filled with caps on the quality and productivity of the work. Every one of us could go to work tonight and start to take and eliminate and reduce those caps. And then the last one, educating people to develop the understanding it's in their interest to work this new way. You see, anyone who gets started on this very quickly, when they do it successfully, sees that it applies to things at home. You know, I have to mow the lawn every Friday, every Saturday. It takes me 3 hours. I go to work this way, and I can figure out how to do that in 2 hours and a half, 2 hours, without too much trouble in the first few weeks.
I figured out how to get it down to zero. I hired somebody.
Somebody gets it down to zero. Right? You just got a very basic one. You eliminated the work.
You got it.
Right?
I got a supplier.
Yeah. One of the requirements for that right way, see, top management support. Okay? Make sure we see it now. We've all had some people, top management support. See, do they really support? See, do we provide top management leadership, right? Leadership. Active, visible leadership. And of course, they're all leads. They have that 90% of the time, see, it's the system that leads to amnesty. See, do we have amnesty? No amnesty, no docky. Right? And yet the very system of management we're talking about is based on finding the troubles and problems, the opportunities for improvement, taking advantage of them. How do we even find them?
Yeah, you remember Dr. Deming talked about driving out fear, and I think one of the reasons that he did that was because so many people were afraid to bring up information for fear that they were going to have their finger pointed at them and saying, you're the problem, you're going to shoot the messenger. And amnesty is the solution. Amnesty says anybody who identifies problems will not be chided. If anything, they'll be applauded.
Exactly. How else are we going to find them if they don't want to tell us?
That's right.
Now, that doesn't mean we're stupid. We're not going to take and allow people to go on just keep making the same trouble and problem every day, every week. We're going to take and train them and get them to other jobs. But it does, if we don't have amnesty, we have trouble right away. I remember there that first day in March, and when after about 4 hours with Deming in the room, and Deming leaves, and when he comes back, while he was gone, I say to my people, I said, this fellow's really got it, this fellow Deming. I think we ought to hire him to help us. And a lot of them said, oh, Bill, I don't think we ought to do that, no. And I say, well, I think I'm going to hire him anyway. So when Deming comes in, I said, Dr. Deming, you've helped these other people. I'd like to have you help us. Would you do that, Dr. Deming, over the next few years to help us to get going so we can compete with all these great companies of the world? Deming said he would under one condition. Bill, I'll help you provide. You'll be the leader, personal leader of the change. You'll see that these 6 vice presidents are the leaders, each in their own area. You'll see that everyone, level by level, will be the leaders of the change. He said, Bill, if you're not going to do that, I won't work with you. Now, I said I would, but little did I know what I was getting into.
That was a major commitment on your part.
Because it was a major commitment. And as a matter of fact, see, people can't really do this unless you're really starting to convert your regular work to work in a new way all the time. Because initially, you have to devote your capital investment of your time and energy, 30, 40, 50, 60% of the time. Mm-hmm. But that's not really what you're doing, nor where you're trying to end up. Where you're trying to end up is that you're going to work this way all the time in everything you do. This is the way you run a meeting. Mm-hmm. This is the way we make decisions in this organization. This is the way that we decide on the new products and all those types of things. And what happens really is, as you do that, it means that in a way you're not working at all in continuous improvement for all of your time, because you're doing everything this way all the time. And that becomes the way everyone thinks, talks, works, acts. That's where we got to go. Next one there, the tool on the right-hand side now of the model, variation. 2 things not the same but different. My old friend Al Lassiter from the University of Tennessee and TAI. What happens? See, because they're not the same. What happens is, of course, we got uncertainty. And then where does all that waste come from? Well, let's get some more stuff. Why don't we get a bigger warehouse? Why don't it take some more time? Why don't we get another machine? Why don't we get another inspector? Why don't we get some more suppliers? Everything, see? Where is it all coming from? All coming from variation in the level. And of course, we did the tools to do this. See, if I'm a senior executive, I can't really set the example if I don't understand the importance of variation, if I don't ask questions about variation, if I'm not looking for people that they can have charts and data that I can analyze and look at and ask the right questions about with the people are going to think, well, Bill doesn't care.
Okay, now how do these CEOs, these presidents and vice presidents, general managers, find out about this stuff? Suppose that they say, okay, maybe Bill Conway has a point. How do I find out about these charts? Where can I learn about them?
Well, a simple place would be right there in the waste chasers. Simple as that. And there are other books as well that do the similar thing. But they can learn about them. Every one of them can learn to make all of these charts right here. Every one can learn to make all these within an hour. They already know how to make Pareto charts. If they haven't run a fishbone meeting, they ought to take and make one right away. If there's a fishbone meeting, they ought to take and have this afternoon or tomorrow morning. They'll understand why teamwork is important. How can someone understand teamwork's importance if they haven't run a fishbone chart, right? The process flow chart, a description of the work. They can make a process flow chart of what happened from the time they left the house in the morning until they got to work. What does it look like? See how to do that. A little run chart. Do they follow the Dow Jones average? A histogram, the distribution of values. And maybe they don't need to have technical understanding of all the things that can happen with a control chart, but they got to understand the principles that are behind it, the difference between common causes and special causes. They need to have that understanding and the use of the simple correlation chart. Everyone, they can take and learn enough here in a day or two to take and start to take and ask the right questions, and then by practicing it and asking the right questions, they'll quickly learn more. But every CEO, all these ones that I'm going over here, you can't leave aside the customer-supplier relationship. You can't leave aside the variation. You're not going to be able to leave aside the industrial engineering. You can't leave aside the things about treating people on those 5 process checks. They're all fundamental.
It's like the parts of a car or a plane. And you leave out any one part and the thing's not going to move.
That's right. And this leads to measurement there, another thing that we listed under variation. And that measurement is a value-added index. And this kind of index, see, they ought to have for their business at all times. If we're in a profit-making business, here we got the revenue minus the purchase content, everything we buy, divided by all employee costs, including the temporaries and the part-timers and everything else, the independent contractors, and divide one by the other. And we see right away now, we now have value-added dollars per employee, for employee costs. You see right away that takes care of most of those things in a reasonable fashion about vertical integration, inflation, and all that type of thing. Now, what is the only way you can get that index to go up? The only ways you can get the index to go up, either get more revenue, higher prices, sell more stuff, change the product mix, decrease the purchase content, pay less for it, buy different materials or whatever it might be, right? Increase the vertical integration, or decrease the employee costs. And what are all those things? Those are all the waste. So if you're not working in the new way, see, you can't do that and you can't drive the index. Now, any business, they ought to have this as a basic index that they're doing to drive.
I can see this for nonprofit organizations as well. This value-added index, I could see, for example, the Red Cross could use something like this.
Yes,
That's certainly not a profit-making organization. Virtually any service organization, profit or nonprofit, just like manufacturing firms, can use this because there's no demand for a profit. What it is the value-added index.
That's right.
And I can see this being used everywhere.
Every place. It's a wonderful thing.
I like that.
Now, if we want to drive that index, how are we going to get at it? Of course, we're going to get at it by the basic industrial engineering concepts and tools. We just can't get away from it. The concepts here are work, pace, and time. Time to do things. We've talked about that a lot. And all these tools for analysis. Now, any of us that have taken the courses in industrial engineering know there are more tools than these. You know, you get onto all the various things of the special type of synthetic time studies and everything to do by work and breaking it down into micro-motion analysis or what have you. So there are other tools. But for the most of the work, for probably 95% of all the work we've got in our organization, these four simple tools will help people to take and do it and make the improvement. Now, once again, all these things are right here in the waste chasers. So, I mean, the tools are readily available for anybody to get at these things, that they can really help someone to do it. And we just can't have any excuses. And as I say, we learned right from the very first day that there was a course. We used to have a 25-hour course. Any area we went into to work in the business, every person in it, from the lowest person to the general manager, had to take that course. And it consisted of the human relations, there for 8 hours, along with an hour or two of imagineering. They had the industrial engineering concepts and the variation in the charts. Every single employee had to take that 25 hours. That was just a basic thing. If you don't know this stuff, you're not ready to talk to other people and work with people as a group. So this is the basic thing that people need to take and really get into work in a new way.
Is that one of the courses that Conway Quality offers?
Yes, we do.
Great, okay.
And teach all the things at the same time. Of course, in work, we get right into the concept of value-added work, which helps you to use these tools to make the improvement. And of course, the value-added work, the work the external customer will pay for, necessary work, things we need to do but don't have any value for the customer. And of course, all work is filled with rework. We'll look at the chart in a minute and see how much rework is in there. And of course, we do some things that just aren't necessary. And of course, then there's some not working. And of course, we got the authorized and unauthorized. The unauthorized, the waiting and the idle and what have you. The other, the holidays and what have you. So no one's here to try to take away anyone's holidays. That's not what we're trying to do. But once you look at what the work looks like, and this comes from samples that have been done all over the world for work, and what does it end up showing? That most people are doing lucky if they do the 20% of work that's value added. You see that rework, 30, 40% rework. Of course, the not working over here includes the time that we're on vacation and holidays and all that.
Bill, this is frightening. Are you telling me that in a 40-hour week, that only 8 hours, one day out of a week, are people on the average providing value-added work to their employer?
That is correct.
That's so frightening. If I were a CEO and I heard that, I'd be scared to death.
Well, see, once you understand and believe this, you can see very quickly here now that if we would look at this work here in the not working, probably out of that 25%, probably about 5 of that is idle and waiting time. Over here now we got the unnecessary things we shouldn't even be doing at all. Clearly we ought to be getting rid of most of that idle and unnecessary. Over here we got to get rid of the unnecessary. Here we got the rework. Now, we probably can't get rid of all the rework, but if we went at it methodically, if we had a Pareto chart of each cause and we went at it reducing it, we'd probably get that down where it'd be down to cut it in half or something like that.
I was thinking we should be able to get rid of 90% of that rework.
A tremendous percentage, whatever.
That's right.
All right? Now we look over here. Even where this is value added and necessary, that doesn't mean we can't make big improvements in it. We can. All that means is that we're working on the right thing. It doesn't mean we got the right equipment. It doesn't mean we got the right technology. It doesn't mean we got the right methods. It doesn't mean we're working at the right pace. It doesn't mean any of those other things. Here we can even improve these by 50%.
Absolutely.
Now, as soon as you say that, you just look at that work and see it collapse. And you wonder why anyone who works this way can double the productivity of all the people over a period of a few years. Why? Because the work is full of waste.
And you've done that for your clients?
Yes.
Wow.
Anyone that works here can make significant improvement, right straightforward, right there. Now, see, once we know all about the work, we're right into the next thing. See, now we can start the Imagineering.
Is that your term, by the way?
No, that originally came, I first read it in a airline magazine about 30 years ago, and it had a description there. It originally came from Alcoa.
Okay.
And it was first imagine the way things could be and then engineer it down to earth.
Gotcha.
Was the way Alcoa started out with it. Visualizing what it is. Now this I regard as the most powerful of all the tools. Because this is the tool, see, where you're creating the gap. You got the facts first, and all the facts of all the waste, and now you're saying, what would it be without it? And that's where we create that difference. And see, that's the difference that drives everything. What does Conway Quality basically do for people? Helps them to take and create the gap, and then helps them to get rid of the gap. That's what it's all about. So, Imagineering, the most powerful of them all. And then, of course,
I was just thinking if I could imagine myself 40 pounds lighter.
now you can think of some process measurements good for that.
Or 6 inches taller, which would give me the same result. But we have to be practical. Excuse me.
And this next one here is just a methodology. They can get rid of this waste and make a process improvement. Now, practically in many organizations in the world have other methodologies that are just variations of this. So I'm not going to try to say this is the be-all, end-all, but it's just a simple way, and once again it's in the waste chasers, and other people have one similar, that get us through a methodology to help us take and get rid of waste so we can make the improvement and get the gains.
It's effectively what we call in industrial engineering the scientific method.
That's right, that's all it is. Now, basically what have we been trying to do the whole time? What we're trying to do here is create the system. In other words, we're trying to change everyone's behavior, create the system. Now, actually there are 7 steps in creating the system that we're teaching people since the early 80s. Now, this is different than a process flow chart. Process flow chart, when you've done it, you do education, now it's over and you want the next one. This one here, you never finish. You do it forever. And so if you're trying to create this system, that means you're trying to change the behavior of everyone in the organization. What are the things you do? You start with education, get their heads right. But it never ends. In today's world, with 90 or 100 good books in English here about all this subject, there should be never anyone stopping working and learning about the new way to work. Should be learning 24 hours a day all the time. Education. Now, when people have the education, what can they now do? They now can act as the leaders. I mean, just how is that work, for instance? You're talking with me and you find out Bill's not educated. How's Bill going to be a leader if he's not educated in this thing? And yet, how often do we see a CEO or some top person not educated trying to act as the leader? And very quickly, what do people down the organization? They see right through him. They listen to his words and they see, oh, he doesn't even understand this, he doesn't understand that, and now expects us to take and follow. So we can't get away, see, without getting ourselves educated. Now, what's one of the main things a leader does? Helps people to create the gap. That's one of the main things I still do today. Create the gap and see how to take and get rid of it. Help people to get rid of it. And then we have these next three here, and these are all work together. Well, I call those three together, the human relations, the training, and work on the projects. I call that building the infrastructure. See, here we're getting our head right. Here we're starting to act as the leader. Here we're creating the gap. Now we're going to start to reduce the gap. And we get people here working together on teams, get them started to take and reduce the gap, give them the training on the tools, get them started on the projects. And what we're doing is, having then built the infrastructure, we're then ready to go on the triangle. Remember we saw earlier? Mm-hmm. We now move from the right-hand side of the triangle over to the left for part of it, and now we get on the big ones. We used to call them major management-directed programs. Nowadays I say that's re-engineering, MMIs, or what anyone wants to call them. They're the big ones that only top management could lead. And of course, this is the basic system that most organizations are not creating. And this is the way we're expecting people to behave all the time, not just when they feel like it. This is the way that we're going to do it 24 hours a day. Now, there's an important cycle here that sets this whole thing in motion. Mm-hmm. And here it is. Move the people into action. So often I see people, organizations out there, trying to get people started by motivating. I want to motivate you, Jack. I want to motivate you. Well, some of us have been in the military. If you haven't, you've had some friend or brother or sister or someone been in the military. You just ask them. There are people that are in the change of behavior business is what the military's in. We all know changing their behavior to create mayhem for enemies when directed, right? And you find out what they did. What do? Do they start out by trying to motivate us? Anyone that's been in knows very well they don't start out motivating at all. They start out, move the people into action. And having moved the people into action, what do we want? Joy in achievement. In other words, don't pick something they're going to fail on. We want the people to succeed, help them to succeed. All right? Having succeeded, they get joy in achievement. Now we're motivated. I mean, what do you do, little children? I take them up the ball field is what I always do with my children and grandchildren. I always bring a ball. I don't care, football, soccer ball,
something,
baseball,
yeah.
right? You have a little boy or girl there. They got a bat, hat on crooked. You know, you're going to now throw them the baseball. They got a little bat they're going to hit. What do? Act like Roger Clemens and throw a high, hard one by the little child's head? No. We throw up the softie, right? We try to hit the bat. Why? Joy and achievement.
Right.
Now we're motivated. Now we move into action. And now we got the cycle started.
Exactly.
This is the cycle. Right? Now, what we do with organizations all around the world, for the last few years, we try to help them move into action. We run these workshops, usually a couple of days, something like that. We've done it with all sizes of companies.
What kind of workshops do you have?
We call this the MIA, Move Into Action Workshop. And what it is, you get the senior management of whatever the level you're operating at. It could be the whole supermarket, the top people of the supermarket, could be a store, could be the meat department, could be any level, people you want to work with. And now, what you help them to do in a series of workshops, first one is to identify and quantify all the waste in their area. You ought to see it change. big supermarket chain. Let's say they're a couple of billion in sales, 2 billion in sales. Here they are, most supermarket chains making 1.5% pre-tax on revenue.
Right.
Boy. And then they go through this thing, and the first thing they found, well, let's say this big supermarket chain we worked with the first time they went through it with the top 30, 40 managers, well, they found the waste that they identified and quantified, well, they found it was about 16%, 17% of revenue on the first pass through. And here they are making 1.5, and here they just found 16, 17 times that amount of waste themselves. And the whole people, everyone's heads changing immediately, just like that. Then we help them take and do the next thing, pick out one of those wastes. Now have each group lay a plan to get rid of it.
Focusing on that specific waste
On
only?
that specific waste only. What is their plan? If they were now in charge, Jack, you're in charge, you got to get rid of it. Here's your team. What would you do to
Okay.
get rid of that? And by the way, Jack, you probably start tomorrow morning. That will be one of the jobs you're going to have tomorrow morning, Jack, just to make it realistic for you,
Okay.
right? And then the third one would be, all right, what are the things that are going to be in the way? And what are the ones that you have control of, Jack, and what are you going to do about them? What are the ones you don't have control of, Jack, and what do you expect other people to do for them? And lastly, what, Jack, are you going to do in each of your team members to change their personal behavior so it will be seen as the leaders are working this new way? We went through that with these people. The change that you bring about is just absolutely enormous for people working this way. It happens very, very quickly.
After you've gone through this move into action workshop, is the next logical step that you or your consultants that work in Conway Quality go out actually into the organization and help them to do the work themselves?
Absolutely. Our job after this is what I call coaching. In other words, it really is help. We're teachers. We're going out to help them do it. We don't go out to do it. Oh, we will occasionally if someone really wants us to, but that's not what we want to do. Our job is to help the people so they get capable to do it. Help the people do it, and we do that with organizations all over the world. And but first, create the gap so you get them focused on the right things. And of course, as I said, you can do that very much right into the plant or a department, just as well as the start. If you start with a supermarket chain, eventually you're going to get down to the store, or you're going to get down to the organization to help them be able to make the improvements. Now,
You know, Bill, you've been talking about a lot of different kinds of firms, and I think that our viewing audience can appreciate the fact that what Conway Quality can do really affects every kind of organization that exists, for profit or not for profit. But what concerns me, and I'd appreciate if you would comment on this, is that a lot of people may be getting the idea that you only do these kinds of things for really large organizations, you know, multi-million type organizations with, you know, thousands and thousands of employees. I know that's not the case, but I'd appreciate if you'd comment on it.
well, I'll just give an example. It was just 2 weeks ago, last Thursday, I was with a company in northern Michigan. Revenue in the 10 to $15 million range, and had the top 10 people,
And this is an organization of how many people?
about 100 people.
Okay.
And they wanted some help to make improvement in their operations so they can improve their profitability and cash generation and things like that. And so in about 2 workshops, one first that they can help them understand what this was all about with all the principles for a few hours, followed by this move into action workshop. What they did was identified and quantified waste there that represented around 35 to 40% of their revenue. Over $4 million in waste they identified and had it all in piles. And here it was, each one. We had them all ranked with the top 5, which ones were easiest to get, fastest could be done, timed, how much gain would be made. And then each of the 2 groups of people, they picked one of each kind, and now their job was to lay a plan to take and get rid of that waste. And so here it was, by the time we left, after just a day and a half with those people, they now knew right what to focus on, everything else. Now we look forward to giving them some help to help carry that out, to make it go. So It didn't make any difference. It could have been a $1 million organization, 10 million, 100 million, 2 billion, 100 billion, any number, makes no difference, public or private. Done them for Navy organizations, public works centers in the Navy, done them for cities, state government did it for one of the states. Where's the waste? But now you get the people focused. They can see what it is all about them. And everyone can understand. See, now you don't have to go around yelling and shouting. You say, well, Jack, do you like it that way? I mean, do you think that's right, that we ought to have this 35-40% waste?
Doesn't do anything for my comfort level.
No. You think anyone's got employment security when you do that?
That's right.
And of course, no one has employment security. And now it's very straightforward. What the heck we got to do? Now we got to get going.
And then when the people that get laid off, it's not the people that cause the waste that get laid off. It's the people at the bottom who are working with the systems that were created.
That's correct. And of course, the only way we can really give people employment security is getting rid of the waste. They don't have any waste. And what happens is, when the big layoffs occur, when we let the waste build up over 5, 10, 15 years, and we don't work this way, that's when the unemployment and the problems start to take and come in. Now, on the next one there, of course, you can see that's the curve that we're taking people through. And so, a lot of us are familiar with this on Death and Dying. They're from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross 15, 20 years ago. And, of course, what we're trying to do here is, in a short period of time, like what did we do for that small company up there in Michigan? We took those senior managers through this curve, right through shock and denial. See, most people get stuck right there, shock and denial. Maybe many of the people looking today at this thing here, see, are stuck in here, shock and denial, their organization. And, of course, we can see where that's going to head if we don't look out. This heads for disintegration. And what do we got to do? We got to get through this. Oh, I'm angry. Oh, look at that CEO that was down here before. Look what he did to us. Look what we did. Look what we should have done. And we bargain with ourselves. Oh, I could have done something. I'm sad. And say, I accept that this is the reality.
Bill, we have a telephone call. We've only got a couple of minutes to go. So what I'm about to say, I'm saying to our caller, could you please identify yourself by name and location, your organization if you'd like, and ask your question? Go ahead.
Yes, hello. My name is Harris Miller. I'm calling from Polaroid Corporation in Waltham, Massachusetts.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. I have a question. I am a student of statistics. I also teach statistics here at Polaroid. And when I was involved in manufacturing, I found a dilemma between quality and volume. I never thought that I would be in such a position. However, there seems to be a contradiction there. I was wondering if you could say something about the dilemma between trying to have quality and also trying to get the volume of units or production.
Bill, you want to comment on that, knowing we've only got a couple of minutes left?
Yes. Basically, just say it this way. If we have the quality fixed, we understand what the parameters are. Now, if we want to increase the volume there, one of the best ways to increase the volume is to take and find the source of all the troubles, problems, errors, complexities, and waste and get rid of them, in which case we will get volume up and it will go with quality. Quality and volume will go together. So that normally, when we have a fixed level of things that we're trying to achieve, we can put those things and they will go together for us. And that's exactly what you achieve by utilizing the methods of working in a new way. And that's what we want to do, whereas in the old system, we tend to have them fighting. If we get quality, we have a very difficult time getting volume. If we got volume, we're going to have a hard time for quality. Once we got to set it out and we work in a new way, we should be able to make big improvements.
They are not mutually exclusive.
No.
Does that help a little bit?
Yes, it does, but you know, when you're in the thick of it and the rubber hits the road, it seems difficult to do both at the same time.
Okay, my best suggestion to you, and I'm not saying this tongue-in-cheek, is call Conway Quality.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And we're getting very short on time. Bill, you want to wrap it up for us?
And lastly, let's just remember in our organizations, our people are counting on you. You, the leader. Are we going to be the leader and create the team to take and do this job? That's the question for all of us, Jack.
Great. Well, Bill, I thank you very, very much. We've only got about a minute left, so let me kind of wrap this up. We've been talking with Bill Conway, the CEO of Conway Quality. Next month, our guest will be Shin Taguchi, the president of the American Supplier Institute International, be talking about robust design and the loss function. And in June, we'll be back from University of Wisconsin at Madison, talking to George Box, preeminent statistician in the area of classical design of experiments. And Bill, I must say that this has been not just a pleasure, but a real education. The opportunity to work with you and to learn of your insights, not only your own, but the ones that you gained from Dr. Deming, has been a magnificent opportunity. And for that, I thank you for being here, and to your organization for permitting you the time away from your regular work. May I say thank you very much for being here. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today on CITV. We'll see you next month, and take care, and don't forget, continue to improve.